What if I told you that going no contact isn't the silver bullet most men think it is? That deleting her number, blocking her, muting notifications, even refusing to reply isn't enough to truly make her regret leaving? You probably think that silence alone will hit her like a tidal wave, that the quiet will echo through her days, make her realize she just walked away from a man who gave everything. But here's the reality you need to hear. Most women expect it. They've seen it before. They anticipate it. They're prepared. No contact stops the conversation. It stops the messages. It stops the noise. But it doesn't dismantle her ego. It doesn't force reflection. And it certainly doesn't make her rethink her choices the way you want it to. You're here because you were loyal, because you gave more than half. You gave your time, your energy, your trust. You committed, you showed up. And when she left, she didn't just leave you lonely. She left you questioning your worth, doubting your judgment, wondering if all that effort, all that investment, all that care meant nothing. And that's exactly what makes this a turning point, a crossroads, because you can let that experience define you as someone hurt, broken, reactive, or you can let it ignite the process that redefines who you are and how you operate in relationships, in life, and in every aspect of your personal power. The first thing you have to understand is that most men don't realize what they're really mourning. You're not grieving her, you're grieving the version of her you created in your mind, the fantasy, the idealized projection. She may have said the right things at the right time, touched your heart, promised a forever that was never really hers to give, but that woman was never real. She was a construct built from your hope, your desire, and your need to believe that someone would see you fully and never leave. And every time you go back to old conversations, photos, or memories, every time you replay moments where she seemed different, every time you linger on the idea of who she could have been, you're feeding that illusion. You're keeping her elevated in your mind, giving her power she doesn't deserve. Burning that illusion isn't easy, it's painful, but it is essential. You have to see her as she was, not as you wished she was. You have to recognize the times she left you on red, ignored your needs, manipulated your trust, or prioritized her convenience over your loyalty. You have to admit without excuse that her actions reflected her reality, not your fantasy. And in that recognition, you reclaim your energy. You stop living in a ghost world where she is perfect, and you start grounding yourself in the reality of her choices, the truth of what she gave and what she didn't, and the lessons her departure taught you. Because this is the first strike in reclaiming power. You stop validating the false pedestal you put her on. From there, no contact alone is just the beginning. You need more than physical withdrawal. You need strategic withdrawal, mental and emotional recalibration. Real impact doesn't come from blocking her. It comes from becoming uncatchable by her influence. That means you stop reacting to anything related to her, including triggers that exist long after the messages have stopped. You stop checking her accounts. You stop listening to mutual friends for updates. You stop replaying past arguments or wondering why she behaved the way she did. Emotional availability, even in thought, is a form of attention. And attention, no matter how subtle, is a resource she is using, even if unknowingly, to maintain a sense of control. At this stage, the key is mastering detachment, not pretending to be unaffected, not acting cold for show, but truly understanding that her choices no longer govern your emotional state. If she posts a story, if her name appears in your notifications, if you hear about her through others, your response is internal calm. No twitch, no emotional spike, no narrative running in your mind. You are free because she no longer has access to your inner world. You're not punishing her, you're reclaiming yourself. And that is infinitely more devastating than 1,000 blocked numbers or deleted messages, because it dismantles the underlying assumption she made, that she could ever control or influence you simply by existing in your life. You also need to understand the psychology behind her expectations. Many women are used to attention. They thrive on it, consciously or unconsciously. They are often skilled at reading reactions, anticipating behaviors, and manipulating emotional energy. They expect you to respond with hurt, frustration, or obsession, but when you don't, when your growth, presence, and progress are indifferent to her existence, you flip the script completely. The silence is no longer absence. It becomes the mechanism of reflection, and reflection, when it occurs internally, is infinitely more powerful than confrontation. She starts asking herself questions she didn't anticipate. Did I misjudge him? Did I overestimate my influence? Could I have kept him if I had acted differently? And that is the subtle psychological leverage real mastery provides. Another critical element is transforming pain into purpose. The energy you invested in heartbreak, the anger, the sorrow, the longing becomes the fuel for evolution. Too many men waste this energy in resentment, obsessing over perceived injustice, replaying betrayals in their minds. A Stoic approach is different. You ask, what can this teach me? How can this experience shape me into someone stronger, wiser, more disciplined, and more aligned with my purpose? You take the heartbreak, the ego wound, and you convert it into action. You move into the gym, into work, into study, into creativity, into any discipline that demands focus and effort. You channel the fire she lit into the forge that shapes your new identity. And that identity must be constructed deliberately. You are not evolving to be noticed. You are not evolving to prove something to her. You are evolving because she revealed where you were weak, where boundaries were porous, where attachment overtook reason. The man you are becoming is self-sufficient. His confidence does not require acknowledgement. His presence is magnetic, not because it attracts attention, but because it exists independently of it. In this process, you cultivate multiple layers of growth: mental, physical, emotional, social, and strategic. You rebuild yourself in shadow, away from eyes that might seek to measure your transformation. This is the environment where evolution is deepest and most lasting. Part of this transformation involves the mirror effect. You don't confront her. You don't explain. You don't try to elicit guilt or regret through words. Instead, your evolution and your discipline become a reflection of the consequences of her choices. She sees in the unfolding of your life the results of walking away. She feels in your absence the weight of what she lost, and she cannot manipulate it because it is not performative. It is intrinsic. Every project you complete, every milestone you reach, every moment of composure under pressure, every demonstration of self-control becomes a silent mirror she cannot avoid. And in that mirror, the clarity of her own actions is reflected back in ways she did not expect. Attention withdrawal is another indispensable element. Ego feeds on engagement. Any sign of concern, Any acknowledgement, even subtle, reinforces the perception that influence is possible. Avoid this at all costs. That means no checking in, no comments designed to elicit response, no thinly veiled messages meant to draw notice. You are no longer a resource she can tap into. Every interaction, even accidental, must be approached as a boundary, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because your energy is finite and yours alone. The depletion of her ability to influence you is the mechanism by which her ego begins to recalibrate or fracture entirely. The next dimension is patience with solitude. Many men fear the silence. They see it as void, a waiting period until she contacts them, until validation arrives, until regret appears. This is a fundamental error. Solitude is not something to endure. It is a space to cultivate mastery. In quiet, away from distraction, you confront your impulses, your desires, your insecurities. You challenge yourself to grow without external reinforcement. You refine your routines, your discipline, your focus, and your energy. You do this not to provoke her, but to reconstruct yourself in a way that no external factor can influence. This is the work of true transformation. As you evolve, you also refine emotional literacy. You become aware of triggers, patterns, and manipulations that previously controlled your state. You observe without judgment, respond without reaction, and act from deliberate choice rather than impulse. You begin to understand the full extent of your own agency, the mechanisms that once tied you to her, and the ways you can use experience to elevate every future interaction, romantic or otherwise, without dependence or attachment. This self-awareness becomes a foundation for all your strategies. Physical, mental, and emotional excellence now intersect. You build your body because strength is an expression of discipline. You sharpen your mind because clarity is an expression of autonomy. You cultivate your emotional resilience because peace is an expression of sovereignty. All three together form a triad of transformation that is self-sustaining, self-reinforcing, and impervious to the whims of anyone else, including her. And in this process, you start noticing a profound shift. Your energy becomes aligned, your focus becomes unbreakable, and your presence becomes magnetic, not because you are performing, but because you are complete. Every step in this journey, from confronting illusion, withdrawing attention, mastering solitude, transforming pain, evolving identity, building presence, and cultivating discipline, is a deliberate action toward one ultimate goal: reclaiming your agency. She may not notice, she may not care, that is irrelevant. What matters is that you are no longer tethered to her reality, her choices, or her approval. That is the true essence of crushing the ego she once assumed she could control. You are no longer a tool in her narrative. You are the author of your own. And in this narrative, you discover a critical principle. Her absence is not punishment, your presence is not reward, and attention is not currency for anyone but yourself. Every ounce of energy, every thought, every action is invested back into your own evolution. Her reactions, if they ever come, are echoes of decisions you no longer participate in. You have become self-contained, self-directed, and self-defined. And this is not about revenge. This is not about proving anything. This is about remembering who you are when no one else is watching, when no one else has power, and when all illusions have burned away. By the time you reach this stage, subtlety becomes your greatest weapon. You do not need messages, confrontations, or posts to validate your progress. You move through life quietly, deliberately, and purposefully. The choices you make in work, in relationships, in health, in social dynamics, and in personal discipline create a presence that speaks volumes without a single word. She may notice it, she may not. Either way, the effect is real. Influence exerted through absence, clarity, and autonomous action. This is where true power resides, not in reaction, not in engagement, but in unaffected, unstoppable growth. Once you've internalized this foundation, the next layer of transformation becomes about integration and refinement. You've withdrawn attention, mastered solitude, transformed pain into purpose, and cultivated emotional literacy. Now it's time to align everything you've built into a cohesive, indestructible self. This is where long-term impact emerges, not for show, not for her observation, but as a natural consequence of living deliberately. A major element here is consistency in action. Growth is not a momentary flare, it's a sustained current. You don't evolve for a week or two hoping she will notice, nor do you make flashy displays designed to provoke regret. You develop routines that reinforce your new identity daily. Every morning, every workout, every mental exercise, every step toward your goals is a brick in the foundation of a man who no longer depends on external validation. Over time, these bricks accumulate into a fortress of competence and autonomy, a structure that cannot be shaken by her absence, her presence, or the opinions of anyone else. At this stage, social strategy becomes subtle but powerful. You engage with the world not to attract attention, not to spark envy, and certainly not to bait her, but to demonstrate mastery through action. This may be professional success, intellectual development, or social influence in circles that matter to you. Your progress is visible only because it is inevitable. It is a natural outcome of your disciplined life. The fact that she may witness this is a byproduct, not the goal. And in that observation, whether conscious or subconscious, the ego recalibration begins. She notices you no longer react, you no longer seek approval, you no longer exist for her evaluation. She sees consequences manifesting silently in your growth, and that is infinitely more effective than confrontation or argument. Part of this evolution involves rewriting your identity. The man you were while invested in her narrative, trusting, loyal, perhaps even overcommitted, does not disappear, but he is transformed. You absorb lessons, internalize discipline, and establish boundaries that are non-negotiable. You define who you are and what you stand for, independent of anyone else's validation. This reconstruction is quiet and deliberate. It occurs in private, in moments she will never see. The change is internal first, external second, and that sequence ensures permanence. What is built for approval is fragile. What is built for self-alignment is unshakable. As this transformation deepens, you also cultivate a refined emotional architecture. You learn to recognize residual attachment and address it before it leaks into behavior. You separate desire from need, attachment from obsession, and acknowledgement from validation. The energy once spent in hope or anxiety is now deployed in self-development, strategic thinking, and purposeful action. In this recalibration, you cultivate the quiet confidence of someone who does not need to dominate or provoke to command respect. That energy is magnetic, silent, and irreducible. Another profound aspect of this phase is strategic patience. You no longer rush milestones or crave immediate proof of your growth. Transformation is cumulative and compound. Just as a tree grows gradually, rooted in soil and nourished by sun and rain, your evolution develops day by day, action by action. The results are long-term and the effects are subtle but undeniable. This patience also serves as a psychological weapon. She expects impatience, she expects reactivity, she expects some form of emotional tethering. When none of it manifests, when your trajectory continues upward regardless of her presence or attention, her assumptions collapse. This is where the principle of silent demonstration becomes key. You do not proclaim your achievements. You do not signal progress. You simply exist in alignment with your evolution. When she encounters the results, whether through shared social spaces, mutual connections, or incidental observation, it is experienced as a natural consequence, not as performance. The absence of intentional display adds weight. She cannot claim it is manufactured to provoke her. She cannot manipulate it. She cannot control it. It simply exists, and its reality is undeniable. Throughout this process, self-respect becomes the central axis. Every choice, every boundary, every action is anchored in self-respect rather than desire for recognition. You no longer invest energy to correct her perception, to win back her attention, or to prove worthiness. These impulses are neutralized because your identity is self-contained. And when self-respect guides behavior, the impact on her ego is automatic. She may have expected insecurity, jealousy, or pursuit. Instead, she finds a man whose life proceeds independently of her validation. That shift is profound and irreversible. Simultaneously, you cultivate deep resilience. Challenges, setbacks, and disappointments are no longer crises. They are opportunities to reinforce discipline, refine strategy, and strengthen character. Emotional triggers that once tied you to her narrative are now neutralized. You meet life's obstacles with composure, focus, and clarity. And this resilience is both internal and external. Internally, you are unshaken. Externally, you project an aura of invulnerability and purpose that cannot be compromised by external opinion or circumstance. As your evolution continues, strategic invisibility becomes increasingly important. You do not operate to be seen. You do not seek recognition from her or anyone else. Growth occurs in the shadows, in spaces where no one is watching, where discipline is internalized and competence is reinforced without audience. This is where real transformation is cultivated. Public validation is a temporary mirror, private mastery is permanent. When her ego interacts with your life at this stage, it encounters a reality she cannot manipulate or influence. And that confrontation is silent but devastating. At the same time, relentless pursuit of purpose amplifies the transformation. You dedicate yourself to projects, ambitions, and skills that expand your domain and consolidate independence. These pursuits are fueled not by revenge or desire for attention, but by alignment with your intrinsic values and long-term goals. The more deeply you immerse yourself in meaningful work, the more energy you reclaim from attachment and projection, the focus shifts entirely to creating results that matter to you, while her expectations, reactions, or awareness are irrelevant. Communication, when necessary, is minimal and deliberate. You do not justify, explain, or attempt to provoke reflection. Words are deployed sparingly, only to clarify boundaries, express necessary information, or maintain integrity. Every unnecessary word is energy lost and a potential vulnerability. Silence, combined with consistent evolution and aligned action, becomes your most potent tool. She cannot predict your thoughts, cannot manipulate your reactions, and cannot influence your trajectory. The combination of self-mastery, strategic invisibility, relentless purpose, and emotional sovereignty creates a force she cannot engage with. She may observe indirectly, she may speculate, she may regret, but she cannot change, control, or predict you. Her ego, which once relied on access and influence, begins to recalibrate or collapse entirely. And this process occurs organically, without confrontation, without spectacle, and without need for her acknowledgement. Another dimension of this evolution involves constructing an unshakable sense of identity. You define yourself by values, principles, and long-term vision, rather than by relationships or external validation. This identity is non-negotiable. It is reinforced daily through action, reflection, and refinement. It is evident in demeanor, decision-making, and priorities. And when she perceives this identity, it is not as a performance, it is as a reality that she cannot alter, reverse, or regain influence over. That realization alone can destabilize assumptions and challenge previous dominance dynamics. Physical transformation complements mental and emotional mastery. Discipline in body translates to confidence in presence. Strength, health, and posture are external markers of internal alignment. They reinforce the narrative of self-mastery silently, consistently, and unavoidably. Every decision to prioritize health and fitness is a statement of autonomy, a rejection of past attachment patterns, and a reinforcement of sovereignty. These actions are strategic, but they are also authentic. They are pursued for self-ownership rather than display. Parallel to physical mastery is social refinement. You curate interactions, friendships, and networks that reinforce growth, challenge intellect, and expand influence. You reduce exposure to dynamics that reinforce dependency, insecurity, or comparison. Every social choice is deliberate, reflecting alignment with long-term goals rather than reaction to external stimuli. This reinforces autonomy and fortifies boundaries. It also subtly communicates competence and stability to observers, including those who may have underestimated you. At this advanced stage, you also cultivate psychological foresight. You understand patterns, anticipate potential manipulations, and recognize emotional triggers before they arise. You neutralize these influences proactively. This foresight allows you to maintain equilibrium even in dynamic environments, ensuring that your progress and composure remain uninterrupted. It is the culmination of reflection, experience, and discipline, producing a state where external events, including her presence, words, or absence, cannot destabilize you. Finally, you embrace long-term vision and continuity. Growth, mastery, and independence are not temporary states achieved to provoke reflection or envy. They are sustained commitments. Every choice reinforces your trajectory. Every habit strengthens your autonomy. Every moment of focus compounds your influence, presence, and mastery. In this way, the ego recalibration of those who once assumed power over you is a natural byproduct of your ongoing evolution. By the end of this journey, you become a man defined not by reaction, not by attachment, not by loss, but by discipline, purpose, and sovereignty. You no longer exist in relation to her. Her influence is null, her presence is irrelevant, and the quiet, relentless, unobservable shift in your life, built in shadow, reinforced daily, anchored in principles, becomes the ultimate testament to the transformation no words could convey. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of these. See you next time.